A lot of the drama was about you and your dad and the conflicts.
Our show had drama?
A little bit. Just a little bit.
A lot of the drama was about you and your dad and the conflicts. Our show had drama a little bit, just a little bit. What happens when a father and son build an empire only to tear it apart in front of millions? This is the untold story behind the rise and fall of American Chopper. From blue-collar beginnings to explosive fame, family feuds, lawsuits, and silence that's lasted over 15 years, the truth runs deeper than reality TV ever showed. You've seen the bikes. Now it's time to hear what really happened behind the sparks, the shouting, and the silence. The rise of the empire. Every time the crew was in the workshop, it seemed like Vinny was deep into the job while Paul Jr. was being told to get more involved. His father, Paul Sr., often pushed him to stop supervising and start welding, grinding, and doing the hard work himself. That was the standard in their world. Everyone working, every bike getting done, no exceptions. For over 10 years, that was the reality behind the scenes at Orange County Choppers, a family-run business that would eventually grow into one of the most recognized custom motorcycle brands in the world. But that success didn't come without a cost. It was built in years of intense labor, creative vision, and a family dynamic that, while passionate, was also full of tension. Before the TV cameras arrived and the world saw their story unfold, Paul Jr. was simply a young man trying to prove himself in his father's world. And even then, the path wasn't smooth. Paul Jr.'s story doesn't begin with fame or money. It begins with work. Most kids in the 1980s were riding bikes, playing video games, or hanging out with friends during summer. But Paul was different. From as young as 12, he was working at Orange County Iron Works, the family's original business. Instead of holidays, he spent his time in a hot, noisy workshop, cleaning up metal shavings, moving tools, and learning how the trade worked from the ground up. Even before that, Paul Jr. was fascinated by the materials around him. He used to collect discarded metal scraps from his father's job sites and build small sculptures out of them. While other kids saw junk, he saw potential. That way of thinking stayed with him. By the time he was 14, he was already welding. And not just as a beginner. He worked with a level of calm and precision that even older tradesmen respected. He wasn't just following instructions. He was developing a mindset and skill set that would define his future career. Of course, working in the family business also came with high expectations. Paul Sr. had a reputation for being tough. He didn't let things slide, especially not for his son. Paul Jr. was often held to a higher standard. If something went wrong, he'd get called out in front of everyone. To outsiders, it might have looked harsh, even unfair. But in the shop, it was seen as part of growing up, a lesson in resilience and professionalism. As time went on, the differences between father and son started to show. Paul Sr. was rooted in old-school methods, relying on physical strength and traditional approaches. Paul Jr., on the other hand, had an eye for design. He was drawn to clean lines, balanced proportions, and creative solutions. At Tone Point, he redesigned a metal railing to make it both stronger and more visually appealing. His father dismissed it at first, but a few days later, without a word, he approved and used it. That silent approval said a lot. While they clashed often, there was always a level of mutual respect under the surface. During his time in high school, Paul Jr. made a decision that would shape his future. Rather than following a conventional academic route, he joined a vocational program. This allowed him to split his day between regular school and hands-on technical training. He studied welding, metal work, and blueprint reading. One of his instructors later said that Paul had a rare gift. He could almost see how metal would move before touching it. That natural intuition gave him an edge, but he didn't rely on talent alone. He put in the hours, practicing every technique until it became second nature. By the time he returned to the family shop after graduation, Paul Jr. wasn't just a helper anymore. He had become a skilled tradesman. At just 19 years old, he was given the lead role in the shop's railing division. This wasn't a symbolic promotion or a favor. The railing business was a major part of Orange County Iron Works' income, and putting someone young in charge came with risk. But he proved himself quickly. Paul introduced new designs that appealed to customers who were willing to pay more and wait longer for his custom work. He also managed a crew of experienced, often older workers, many of whom were hesitant at first, but eventually came to respect his leadership. Despite the success, Paul Jr. began to feel creatively limited. Designing and fabricating railings and staircases was steady work, but it didn't excite him the way building something more dynamic might. Quietly, he started sketching motorcycle designs in a notebook. It was a passion he shared with his father, who around that time had also started thinking about bikes again. What started as a hobby quickly turned into something more serious. Paul Sr. saw one of his son's sketches and was surprised. It wasn't just functional, it was artistic. That moment was a turning point. Instead of brushing it off, Paul Sr. said the words that would launch a new chapter for the family. Let's build bikes for real. With $175,000 gathered from the Iron Works business, they launched Orange County Choppers. But it wasn't an equal partnership. Paul Sr. kept 80% of the business. Paul Jr. held the remaining 20%. At the time, it didn't matter. They had very little, just a cold basement, a few tools, and a shared ambition. Their first bike, called True Blue, took 4 months to complete. It featured a deep blue paint job with white flames, and the craftsmanship surprised everyone who saw it. When they took it to Daytona in 1999, the reaction was overwhelming. People in the custom motorcycle scene took notice. Their shop, once quiet and modest, began to attract attention. But the road ahead wasn't easy. In the early days, they operated in a small, freezing workshop. Tools constantly broke down, suppliers demanded cash up front. Money was tight and long hours became the norm. Paul Jr. was often sleeping on a couch in the workshop, working 18-hour days just to meet deadlines. The stress levels were high, and the arguments between father and son were frequent and intense. These weren't staged for anyone's entertainment. They were part of the survival process. Despite everything, they kept going. The bikes they produced gradually gained more attention, and the business began to grow. Then in 2002, a phone call changed everything. A television producer named Craig Polyigian had read about their work in a magazine. He called Orange County Choppers pitching an idea for a reality show. When Paul Sr. picked up the phone and heard the pitch, his first response was blunt. "What the hell do you want?" The idea, a show about restoring junkyard bikes, didn't interest him. They built bikes from scratch, and that's what he wanted people to see. The initial deal fell through, but the producer returned weeks later with a revised concept, a series showing their real process, arguments, and all. Paul Jr. was against it. He wrote his father a 5-page letter explaining why he thought it was a bad idea. He was worried the cameras would distort everything and turn their work into a circus. But they needed the money, and in the end they signed the contract. Arguments between Paul Sr. and Jr. weren't occasional. They were daily. Most of the fights boiled down to control. Jr. wanted more freedom to design and run his own projects. Sr. wanted discipline, structure, and loyalty. The cameras often caught the surface-level conflict, but what was happening behind closed doors was far more intense. Staff members walked on eggshells. The pressure to keep building, keep filming, and keep performing was immense. Then came the breaking point. In September 2008, Paul Jr. was late to work, something that had happened before, but this time it triggered a chain reaction. Paul Sr. snapped. What could have been a simple warning turned into an explosive confrontation. The fight escalated quickly, and in front of the entire crew, Paul Jr. defended himself, pointing out that no matter what, he always delivered. Sr. wasn't interested in explanations. He saw it as disrespect. In a moment of rage, Jr. threw a chair across the office followed by a trash can. He then kicked a door open and stormed out. Paul Sr. chased after him and in the heat of the moment fired him on the spot. That chair-throwing moment would later become a meme replayed countless times on the internet and in reality TV highlight reels. But at the time it wasn't funny. It was a complete breakdown of a family and a business partnership. The fallout was immediate. The shop was divided. Some of the team supported Jr., believing he was the driving force behind the company's best work. Others stayed quiet, worried about losing their jobs or facing Senior's anger. Customers began to worry, too. With the designer behind some of their most famous bikes gone, would Orange County choppers still deliver the same quality? Behind the scenes, things got worse. TLC, the network airing the show at the time, reminded Paul Jr. that he was still under contract. Walking away from filming could have legal consequences. For a short while, he returned as an independent contractor, but it was clear the relationship was broken. By April 2009, he was completely out. Paul Sr. wasn't content with just pushing his son out of the company. He wanted him out for good. That's when he tried to buy back Jr.'s 20% stake in Orange County Choppers. When Jr. refused to sell, Sr. filed a lawsuit. The legal battle wasn't just about money. It was about power. Sr. argued that he had the right to buy back the shares for $500,000. Then in a further move, headed another lawsuit, demanding an additional $1 million in damages. Strangely, he also made the company itself a co-defendant, putting Orange County Choppers on both sides of the legal battle. It was a strategy designed to squeeze Paul Jr. out entirely. The heart of the legal fight was a clause in the original agreement that said Sr. could buy out Jr.'s shares at fair market value, but the contract didn't define what that meant. The vague wording turned into a major issue. The case went to the New York Supreme Court in 2010. Initially, the judge sided with Sr., ruling that the clause was enforceable and that an outside appraiser would determine the value of the shares. For a while, it looked like Jr. had lost everything. That in court, the two men sat just feet from each other, but never spoke. The silence between them said more than any testimony. But then in December 2010, the appellate court reversed the ruling. They declared the clause too vague tone force. That meant Jr. kept his 20% stake in Orange County Choppers. It was a legal victory and a personal one. Against the odds, the son who had been fired and sued was still standing, and his father couldn't force him out. Even with the court win, Paul Jr. was restricted by a 1-year non-compete clause. He couldn't build motorcycles until 2010. So, he pivoted. During that time, he explored other design projects, including a camping grill for Coleman and public park installations. It was auto-UG period, but he kept pushing forward. He and his wife Rachel converted a room in their home into an office and hired a young assistant to help with computer work. As soon as the non-compete ended in April 2010, he made a bold move. He opened his own shop, Paul Jr. Designs, right across the street from Orange County Choppers. And he didn't do it alone. Key figures from OC followed him. Vinny DiMartino, Joe Polifico, Nub Collard, and even Mikey walked away from the company to join him. Not long after, Cody Connolly joined the team as well. It wasn't just a new business. It was a quiet rebellion. Discovery Channel saw an opportunity. They greenlit a new show called Senior vs. Junior, debuting in August 2010. It pitted the two shops and the two men against each other. The idea was simple. Watch father and son build bikes, compete for clients, and clash over their very different styles. But what made for compelling television came at a personal cost. The show didn't heal the rift, it widened it. While Paul Sr. leaned into the dramatic tension for ratings, Paul Jr. had his doubts. He had already seen what reality TV could do to personal relationships. Still, the cameras rolled. Audiences were encouraged to take sides. Viewers who once tuned in to see bikes were now watching a very public family feud. Critics called it tantrum TV, and it lived up to the name. But beneath the theatrics was a real story of estrangement, pride, and